Hello, welcome back to the Workforce Energy Management series. In this last series of the spring sessions, we're going to talk about tough talks into healthy conflict. And how we're going to do that is through a 5-step prepping for conversation process. And it's kind of like a checklist. And this is going to not only help your defenses decrease, but it's going to set up the conversation for success. So 20 years in human resources, I got some conflict stories. I got some drama, some things you couldn't even make up if you tried. I also was the union relations representative, which means sometimes people hated me from across the table before we even started the conversation. Contract negotiations, multi-million contracts, lots of conflict. But what I have found out is through these steps that I'm going to go through, this prep checklist, I was able to not only diffuse the conversation into more of this genuine discussion, but get better results and not drain my energy. As you know, I work with organizations and individuals to engage energy and productivity without burning out. So when we talk about conflict, man, that is an energy drainer. I've had conflict conversations where I am just exhausted after, even though it was only a 15-minute conversation. And it's because your nervous system just goes through the ringer. It gets on the defense, fight, flight, or freeze, and then you have to get out of it. That is expending a lot of energy, a lot of brain and emotional calories. So how we're going to go about this is diffusing the situation before the conversation even begins. So we're going to go through the 5 genuine conversation prep checklist items. And why I say genuine conversation is because people fear conflict. 2 of the 4 DISC work styles will avoid conflict. They'll go the extra mile to not have conflict. So in the reframe of actually having a genuine conversation, you can already diffuse that fear by changing how you look at conflict. So if you avoid conflict, it's going to build. It's going to build into this big monster and drain your energy more than you could even imagine. You're going to not take opportunities. You're going to go other routes intentionally just to avoid this conflict. So when we reframe it to a genuine conversation, you get somewhere. You get into a better result and you don't drain your energy so much. So we're going to go through these 5 parts of the checklist, and then I'm going to leave intentional time at the end so that you can actually plan for your next conversation. We absorb a lot of information, especially out here. Podcasts, videos, trainings, webinars, and then how many of you do something with this information after? Yep, I have plenty of PowerPoints, conferences, models just sitting in my desk from things that I absorbed. I'm like, yes, that's it. And I never do anything with it. So we're going to do something with it. But we need to end today intentionally on time so you can take 5 minutes to start prepping your next conflict conversation. So let's go through the first one. The first one is open-ended conversations. And what I mean by open-ended conversations and what you're going to prep ahead of time is, do you come from a place of curiosity? Do you come from a place of understanding? Do you come from a place where you want to discover what this relationship could be, what this result could look like? And what I'm finding in workforce energy management programs is we are so stuck in our ways, right? We like how we do things. We might be stressed out, so then we're really stuck here because it feels safe. And so we're almost creating our own conflict because we don't want to understand others. We don't want to discover what they're doing and why. And we've forgotten how to be curious. But in a changing world, in a time that you can have flexibility and the workforce is changing, the future work is not coming, it is here. I want you to shift gears. I want you to shift gears to open-ended questions. And here is 3 to kind of get you started. What might I not be seeing clearly in this situation? All right, that's a hard question to ask. It's actually better in a group setting, but it's a hard question to ask yourself because if you're already not seeing it clearly, will you understand the answer to that question? You're already looking through a foggy windshield of disillusionment, right? So checking yourself is going to be difficult. So doing this with a partner, a team member, an unbiased friend is going to help you in understanding the answer to that question. So what are you not seeing clearly in this situation? Do you see how we just stepped in to curiosity? Do you see how we kind of realize that there might be more to discover? The next question, what assumptions am I making that could be getting in the way? And we're going to get into that in just a little bit more, a little deeper. And then the third question I want you to ask yourself, what outcomes do I truly want for this relationship, not just the issue? That was a hard one for me, because when you got a labor union in your face about something that they might not understand or not have all the information for, it might have been escalated because of gossip across the plants, things like that. You just get worked up and you're like, why try? Why even have this conversation? It is what it is. But that's not the outcome I wanted. And that's not the relationship I wanted with the union. So really ask yourself, with the conflict person, of the conversation that you need to have with this person, what outcome do you truly want for the relationship? Not just the issue. The issue is a moment in time, a milestone event in the journey you will have together. So what relationship do you truly want? And that will get you to focus away from not just the issue, but like what does your relationship want to be like going forward? Do you see how these three questions just move us into curiosity and understanding and discovery? And it kind of already put your defenses down, because it brings us to our next point, which is judgment. Right? When we get into judgment approach, which a lot of us will say, I don't judge, I'm not a judgy person. But have you ever asked yourself, truly, are you right or wrong? Do you go into conflict or conversations thinking that? Have you went into a conflict conversation and you already decided who is right and who is wrong? And the old classic saying goes, if you think that way, you already lost. Right? Because there's probably another option. So the second thing in the prep checklist is a non-judgmental approach. So we ask the open-ended questions as part of our prep. What am I not seeing clearly? What do I not understand all the way? Now let's get into a non-judgmental approach. If you've already decided who's right and wrong, you're not going to have a good result from this conflict conversation. You're going in with the wrong intentions. You don't want it to be successful. You just want to prove that you were right. Ooh, that's negative energy, right? That relationship ain't going to go very far. So when you move to a non-judgmental approach, back up from the I'm right, you're wrong, right? And that gets us into some of this experience bias, some of this binary bias. So experience bias is things that have happened to us, right? And maybe you had a bad boss. Maybe you had someone that slighted you. Maybe you had someone that said they would do something and they didn't do it. Said they would do something and then they didn't. Said they would do something and then they didn't. So are you going to ask them a fourth time? Probably not, right? You have this experience bias that you already seen a pattern. You've seen the trends. You're not going to ask again. So you just created your own conflict instead of having a conversation. So this experience bias is going to creep up, and I see it a lot with leaders. They'll say limiting beliefs like no one wants to work anymore. They'll say, well, yeah, that's how they always work. That's how it is. That's just Joe, right? So all these experience biases kind of come out, and those are from our core. Those are from core experiences that have shifted in how we behave. So you're going to have to be intentional in being aware and calling those biases out. The other bias I want you to be aware of in this judgmental approach is a binary bias. Now, binary bias is exactly like how it sounds, two, which means it's black or white, right or wrong. Do you see how that doesn't get you anywhere? There's two options. What if there's a third? What if there's a fourth? I want you to move away from these binary biases into a spectrum. So maybe there's black or white or right or wrong, but what's in between? A little from your side, a little from their side, and you can move forward, a more successful situation. There's even things that you could come up with that you didn't even realize, and it's successful for more people outside of that conflict relationship. So really checking your judgment and your approach to a non-judgmental approach through addressing your experience biases and your binary biases are going to be successful prep in a successful result for this conversation. Now, let's move to the third one, and that's understanding of the topic. And working in HR, people will come in my office and they would be all heated and emotional, and I would know some of the facts already of what's going on and realize they don't have all the facts, or they don't really understand the whole picture of the issue of what's going on. And here's a great example that I saw a lot in HR, but then as I did mastermind programs and these workforce energy management programs, a lot of other leaders had this similar scenario. So here is an example. There's an employee on your team and it seems like they're not really working on what they should be working on. They're probably watching YouTube or listening to podcasts or chit-chatting in the lunchroom or remotely not even working, doing their laundry and things like that, right? Assumptions. You have your biases in there. And you don't know the facts, and you're not taking time to explore, to learn, to be curious with those open-ended questions. So without this understanding of the topic and actually what's going on, you're thinking this employee is not working. This employee is doing nothing. This employee is underperforming. But then we switch gears, right? We switch into this prep of how we're going to have this conflict conversation with this employee who's not working, in quotes. And you move to a place of understanding and realize you're asking a little bit more about the facts. You're asking about what they're working on, what's their workload look like, what's really, draining their energy lately. And the leaders find out, and I would find out too in HR, that they're working their butts off, that they're working even long hours, but they're not working in what you're tracking because another department has borrowed them for a project because they have a skill set in it, or someone else sucked them into this project, and then that person sucked them into this project. So when you look at all those activities that they're doing, they actually have high output. It's just not in what the leader was tracking. So it's workflow dysfunction. It's energy draining activities for the initial team, but all the other teams are benefiting from this person's activities. So do you see where the conflict automatically got diffused because they just understand the situation, the topic that they're talking about already with this person? So it's not that this person isn't working. You're going to have to address their poor performance, and maybe you're going to lose one of your team members because you're going to have to separate with them. No. That wasn't even the situation at all. When you really deep dive into these things, into the topic and understand it, you will find out that the reality of the situation is not the story that we've all been telling us in our head, in between each other gossiping, that we really derailed from what was really going on. So when you come from a place of understanding, you really get down to what is the issue? What is the true problem causing the dysfunction of why you're even having this conflict conversation? Another situation that I want to talk about is when I would have disagreements with the union, it's because someone else got involved and started twisting words. The telephone tag where one person tells another person, then they tell another person slightly different, and that goes on 15 more people. And by the time it got to the person it needed to, whole different story, whole different tone, and of course, in this situation, emotionally charged. So when we come from a place of understanding the true situation and topic, the defenses always came down. We diffused the situation, and we just talked about the root cause issue. And usually it was someone just needed to communicate directly with someone else. So are you going right to the source when you do these things? So number 3 is understanding the topic. Truly taking time to understand what you're talking about, because you're creating more conflict than what's even there. Now, let's go over to the 4th one, which is one of my favorite because it really tells you who you're talking to and what you're getting into. And that's DISC work styles. So say I'm prepping for this conflict and I have prepared the open-ended questions that I need to check myself to get myself into a curiosity mode. I have made myself aware, and I've checked myself for my judgmental, my experience, my binary bias. And I've dug into some of the facts of the topic so that I can speak intelligently about the issue at hand. Now, the 4th one is knowing who you're talking to. And I think that's important because when you can meet people where they're at, where their behavior needs, a lot of defense comes down and they feel seen, they feel heard, and you can get to success so fast. I've had conflict conversations that have lasted 2 hours because you just go around and around and around and back and forth and you try different things, and that's exhausting in itself. And then I've had conversations where they're 10 minutes because I understand their DISC work style, what they need, And I come in with that approach. So D's are dominants. These are our reds. They want results. That's what they want. They need the wins, and that's why they're going to be impatient. So it might not even be that they disagree with what's going on, causing the conflict. It might be that they're just impatient or they're not getting the results that they desired. Speak from their work style, and you can see some of those true issues of the conflict between your relationships coming up. I's or influence, that's our yellows, they like to be open, sometimes overly open. So they don't really mean everything they say that comes out of their mouth. They're just kind of saying what's in their mind, saying what they think, and they want everyone to have a good understanding of it. So they might be even nitpicking too far down when it doesn't need to be talked about. So really coming at them, acknowledging, hey, you're an I know that you want everyone to have an understanding of this, but what do we need, me and you, to move forward, right? Refocus on the issue, the conflict at hand. The other thing that might happen with I's is they might be impulsive. Because they want everyone to get along, they might just schedule a quick meeting without prep. That might not be super successful. Maybe we need 24 hours to cool down and then go into it. The other thing that they might do is fear of rejection. So they might agree to something in your conflict conversation, but not actually feel super comfortable with it. They just didn't want to be rejected. So having that conversation in your conflict discussion is going to be important. Hey, you're an I know that you want this to go well. So what does well look like for you, right? Genuine conversations. S's are supporters. They're huge on conflict avoidance. So S's, this episode is for you. You need to get comfortable with conflict because it's going to help you move forward and release that pack, that weight that you're carrying, avoiding all that conflict. And a way to do that is by having genuine conversations about how you work. You're the supportive. You're the gaps in between departments. You're the people seeing things from behind the scenes. And sometimes you don't get a voice. Sometimes you don't get that space to voice up. So having that conversation in smaller groups or in that conflict discussion is going to be important. Is you can create boundaries and a foundation for you to stand on, but you got to have the conversation. Doing this prep is really going to diffuse some of that fear that you have of conflict. And C's are compliance, our blues, they want data and details. So really when you look at a C, and I was the opposite, I'm an I, social, don't need a lot of data to move forward, and C's need data to move forward. They feel more comfortable, less risky. So we are opposite work styles. And I have realized as I approach a C with any type of conflict that really what they're looking for is data, details, and what are the next steps. Who's going to own what? And that clarity will call them forward. So a lot of times in conflict, when I can identify a behavior, work style, and they're a C, I know they're just missing some details. They're missing some data, and that muddy area is causing chaos in their world. It's causing the conflict. So when we bring clarity to the data and details, we can both move forward with clear next steps. So C's are actually probably the easiest to identify and move forward when you're talking about conflict. Now, again, I come from manufacturing, so I had a lot of C work styles around me. Now, when you look at DISC work styles on your team and you use this tool in your organization, use the tool. It's not a weapon to say you're right, you're wrong. It's not a weapon to say you should be doing this because you're a D. No. It's a tool to have a genuine conversation, to say, hey, I know you're a D and you want to move fast and you're probably going to be impatient with what I'm going to say next. But if we want a successful result to move forward, here's some things that I need, right? Because you're hitting both things. You're saying, hey, I know you're impatient, but also I know you want results. So let's look at the steps to get you a good result. And so when you do this in your organization and you use it as a tool, you can bring it into conflict conversations, and it's not so personal. It's not saying you, it's not saying Kelly, it's saying, hey, I know your work style is a D, right? Already backed up, right? They understand my natural work style, and it's not so personal, finger pointing. Now, when we go into this fifth one, it's important to understand what is your workflow of the day. So when I say workflow, I mean, what is your flow? When I would have some conflict conversations in the morning, like 6 a.m., third shift, I would have to do some disciplinary, or I would need to separate an employee. I might have a union meeting. And then I would have to, boom, right at 8 o'clock, walk into an interview and smile like a psycho, like something horrible and conflict didn't just happen the last 2 hours. And I sit up straight with a fake smile on my face saying, it's a great place to work here. That's not energy management, right? So when we talk about conflict, why a lot of people fear it and avoid it is because it's draining. So how you can prep for this, how you can set it up is don't put it after another draining activity. Know your flow of the day. So say if you're going to dread and avoid conflict, I want you to have these conversations, this genuine conversation in the morning, right? Because otherwise all day you're going to be ruminating, you're going to be stewing, you're going to be causing your own stress, straining your energy until that meeting at 3 p.m. in the afternoon. Have it right away in the morning. Alternatively, if you don't avoid conflict, but you know it has to be done and you're prepped for it, if you have it at the end of the day, make sure that your day doesn't get away from you. Because there's nothing worse than saying, I want to have a genuine conversation with you about a tough talk, and then you miss it or you don't show up on time. Have you ever had an employee that finally gets the guts to talk to their leader about something and then their leader reschedules the meeting? Do you think the genuine conversation that the rescheduled date next week is going to be as impactful as the date that they planned for today? No, it's not. So part of workforce energy management is understanding your workflow of tasks, workflow of what drains you and what doesn't, and setting it up intentionally for a successful day. So you don't go home at the end of the day and you're just drained. So what is your workflow of the day? And how can you manage it so that you're setting up this genuine conversation, this tough talk into healthy conflict in a way that's going to be successful? Now, the only way that you can go about utilizing this checklist is by utilizing this checklist. Do you hear me? I have a lot of leaders I work with, and they'll do one. They'll say, oh yeah, I know their disc work style. Okay, well, what did you do to prep that? What questions did you write down that you want to bring up in the conversation? What did you dig into about the topic so you come from a place of understanding versus blame? You did this, or I have to do this because you didn't do that, right? Do you see how all 5 of these prep checklists has not only diffused the situation, but got you comfortable with this conversation that you're going to have? It's not a fear anymore of what's going to happen or what could happen. It's almost exciting to step forward because of what could be and how better this relationship will be and the results from it. So when you ask open-ended questions, when you come from a non-judgmental approach, when you have a good understanding of the topic, so facts, not story, and when you are having this pre-convo connection of understanding their work style, and you're setting your day up for workflow optimization, so you're not bringing all that crud into the conversation that doesn't have to do with your relationship, you're setting this conversation up for success. Now, we left 5 minutes left. I want you to take this checklist, identify a conflict conversation that you need to have, a healthy conflict that you need to really address the relationship, the issue at hand, and I want you to start prepping for a genuine conversation.